Right. Okay. Order, order. Before I call the honourable gentleman for Hazel Grove to move the... It's the one, isn't it? It's the one. To move the motion. I'd like to inform members that Parliamentary Digital Communications team will be conducting secondary filming during today's debate. I will call Lisa Smart to move the motion. I will then call the Minister to respond. There will not be an opportunity for a member in charge to wind up, as is the convention for 30-minute debates. Order, order. Lisa Smart to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Chair. I beg to move that this House has considered the Peak Forest and Macclesfield Canals and the funding thereof. I rise today to speak about a subject very close to my heart, our beautiful canals, including the magnificent 16-lock flight in Marple. Our canals are not just waterways, they are part of our national story and deeply woven into the fabric of our community. They are remarkable pieces of living heritage that we must protect. And protecting them is one of my 3 asks of the Minister today. I want us to protect our canals as precious green corridors and a direct link with our nation's and my community's proud industrial heritage. I want our canals to be funded as a critical part of our infrastructure. And I want us to value our canals. We should look at them as assets to be cherished, not simply liabilities to be managed. The Peak Forest Canal, one of Britain's most scenic waterways, runs alongside the River Goyt for much of its length. And the Macclesfield Canal, a historic link between Manchester and the Midlands, they're jewels of our waterways. And they're where they are because of the Stockport mills, notably Mellor Mill, which was the largest cotton spinning mill in the world in its time, and the Derbyshire quarries. And today we can still see that heritage along the canals with Unity Mill in Woodley, Romley Board Mill and Goyt Mill in Marple. As the canals cross through Marple, they make up 5 kilometres of designated conservation areas, and each lock on the Marple flight is Grade 2 listed, meaning they are protected as areas of special interest. And the Marple Aqueduct, itself a historic landmark, is the highest in England and a Grade 1 listed structure. Protecting these landmarks costs money and, as an example, with 16 locks and each lock gate costing £150,000 or so, as they have to be handcrafted, we can see how the bills can quickly add up. Now, back in 2012, all of British Waterways' assets and responsibilities in England and Wales were transferred to the newly founded charity, the Canal and River Trust. And unfortunately, these heritage and community treasures face an uncertain future. Alongside the regular care and maintenance of the canals and 71 large reservoirs that feed the canals, the CRT has had to tackle significant work, like the extensive restoration project of Toddbrook Reservoir, which supplies both the Peak Forest and Macclesfield canals. After a partial failure in 2019, the repairs came at a hefty cost of £15 million, and such massive efforts highlight just how vulnerable this vital infrastructure really is. Funding changes made by the previous Conservative government, which will see cuts of 5% a year for 10 years, will drain nearly £300 million from the Trust. These reductions will undoubtedly undermine the Trust's ability to sustain the canal network, making closures of these treasured public spaces, I fear, sadly inevitable, unless something changes. I would willingly give way.
Grove for bringing this forward and just presenting a lovely visual account of our constituency and what I see, perhaps looking from what you said and what I observed, it's really a potential not yet realised. The potential for tourism, the potential for the environment betterment, the potential for living for people across that community. Does the Honourable Lady feel there are so many things to gain by this? Does she feel that perhaps government should perhaps search in their pockets and find that extra money?
Well, I'm very grateful to the Honourable Member for that point that he's made there about the potential not yet realised. I'll come on in my remarks later on to highlight some of the uses of our canals now, but there's an awful lot more we could be doing. And one of the points I'd like to encourage government to do is to look at the canals in the round. So look at what they could do environmentally, for tourism, for health, for our communities, and just to make it easy for some people to take the most direct way to walk to work. So I completely agree with the Honourable Gentleman's point. I'm a proud and long-standing trustee of the Stockport Canal Boat Trust for Disabled People, and I refer all colleagues to my register of interest. And I cannot overstate the joy, the serenity and the community value that can be found in spending some time cruising at a maximum speed of 4 miles an hour. The Trust operates the New Horizons. It's a fully accessible 72-foot narrowboat, and it's run by volunteers, offering passengers of all abilities time enjoying our canals. And while cruising, we see families walking their dogs, enjoying nature. We see joggers, cyclists, and as I said to the Honourable Gentleman, people simply using the towpath as the most direct route to walk to work. And beyond then their cultural and historical significance, these waterways are crucial for nature, well-being and combating climate change. They provide a vital habitat for wildlife and serve as a natural green corridor connecting diverse ecosystems that are bursting with biodiversity. Canals also play a really important role in water management, reducing flood risk and increasing climate resilience. Problems with reservoirs are problems for all of us. And for health and well-being, canals offer an unparalleled sanctuary. Our waterways are freely accessible and provide opportunities for walking, cycling and relaxation in green spaces. At a time when public health concerns are high and such spaces in urban and suburban areas are scarce, they deliver a cost-saving gift to the NHS. And research suggests that gift amounts to over £1 billion a year. Our canal towpaths are often flat by design, and they can offer accessible physical and mental health benefits to many. My constituents in Hazel Grove know this well. When I knew I'd secured this debate, I asked for stories about how the canal has touched their lives, and I was moved by the overwhelming response, receiving over 100 messages in only a couple of days. Older community members shared how they find solace and companionship in walking along the towpaths, while parents and grandparents spoke of the joy of exploring the canals with their children and grandchildren. And one resident shared how walks along the canal were crucial for recovery after a heart attack and a major cancer operation, with the serenity and beauty of the canal as key to their healing. For many, the canals are an escape from traffic pollution and noise, and they're a sanctuary of peace amid a busy world. Let's imagine if we looked at them as though they were part of the solution of how we encourage people out of their cars rather than problems to be managed and towpaths to be fixed. Before I conclude, I want to make the case for the 16 lock flight in Marple to be designated as a World Heritage Site. This lock flight is an extraordinary testament to our industrial and engineering heritage, representing a pivotal era in Britain's industrial past. Such recognition would only attract global interest, a boost for local tourism, but it would also ensure the locks are protected and celebrated for generations to come. I am committed to working closely with our local community, with heritage experts and international bodies to make this vision a reality, ensuring that these locks get the recognition they truly deserve. So I'm asking the Minister today to protect our canals, to fund our canals and to value our canals. They are assets, and with a bit of creative, holistic thinking, they could do so much more. They could save money for the NHS and for our transport budgets, not simply be liabilities to be managed. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered funding for Peak, Forest and Macclesfield Canals. Tim Rocker.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your service today. And I want to thank my honourable friend from Hazel Grove for calling this important debate on a really valued public amenity, the Macclesfield and Peak Forest canals, both canals that mean a lot to me, not just because they're in my constituency, but because they were canals that I'm familiar with from my childhood. From walking my first dog down by the Peak Forest Canal in Disley, Walkman plugged in, listening to the Spice Girls, to now using it for rest and relaxation after trying weeks here in Westminster. And it matters to many of my constituents as well. And of course, Macclesfield, a third of it, sits within the Peak District National Park, and the canals that run through our countryside add to the beauty of the area that I represent. And the Macclesfield Canals are the first network of canals in the world to receive the coveted Green Flag Award. The Green Flag Award is a MHCLG scheme to recognise and reward well-managed parks and green spaces, and it's judged on 8 very strict criteria that include environmental standards, cleanliness, sustainability and community involvement. And no wonder that the Macclesfield Canal has hit this high standard, especially considering the tireless hours that volunteers put into maintaining it. And I want to pay tribute to the volunteers that are involved in maintaining our wonderful canals here today. The beauty of the canal is further enhanced by the impressive and historic buildings and places of interest located alongside it. And the member for Hazel Grove mentioned some of them, and I'd like to draw attention to those in my neck of the woods, including the Clarence and Adelphi Mills in Bollington, as well as the famous Hovis Mill in Macclesfield. And my mum will be disappointed if I don't mention her home, which sits alongside the Peak Forest Canal. Our canals are not only beautiful green spaces, but their significance as a network, as has already been pointed out, that provides jobs, homes, transportation and a thriving habitat for wildlife cannot be underestimated. And it's what makes it especially heartbreaking, as was alluded to before, is the threat that our canals face due to the ongoing financial strain on the Canal and River Trust, which is the legacy of the last Conservative government. Cuts to CRT funding by 2027 will amount to more than £300 million. And this is against a backdrop of certainly mixed performance and some boater dissatisfaction with the CRT. Boaters in my constituency have raised real concerns with me. They deserve to be treated fairly and receive the services they need. And the increase in cost of boat licences and surcharges for those without a fixed home mooring does risk a way of life that thousands have chosen. Continuous cruises often have the lowest incomes but are being asked to pay more. And I am sympathetic, as I know members will be, that the costs that the CRT are passing on are as a result of this austerity. And sadly, in this place, as we're discovering since the election in July, there are pressures across many aspects of public life that are as a consequence of the inheritance from the last government. Finally, I'm pleased to have been appointed to the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Select Committee last month, and we had our first meeting yesterday. And I know that canals will be high on the agenda for that committee. I know that we'll be speaking to the CRT in the coming weeks and months, and I'm grateful to be in a position to advocate for canals and for rural communities in general, and particularly for my constituents in Macclesfield, to ensure that rightful environmental concerns are heard and that we protect our cherished countryside and our amazing canals. And again, I commend my honourable friend for calling this debate.
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Dowd, and what a pleasure it is to serve under your chairmanship today. Can I begin by congratulating the Honourable Member for Hazel Grove, both on her election and on securing this important debate. And similarly, can I congratulate the Honourable Gentleman for Macclesfield on his election and his excellent participation today. We've heard a lot this morning about the many benefit that these two beloved canals bring to so many people in Hazel Grove and Macclesfield, and which have been so eloquently articulated by honourable members present. I was particularly interested to hear about the work done by CRT with the New Horizons canal boat, that really important piece about widening access to the canal for children who in landlocked in the centre of the country might not have had much access to the water, and bringing water closer to the people. And I think as I was listening to the Honourable Lady, I was thinking about how our canals helped build our country and how our mills helped clothe not just our own country but the world, and how they're an absolutely vital part of our industrial heritage. And I did have a wry smile to myself when she talked about lock gates and the flight locks. because the last remaining lock gate maker is actually in Stanley in Wakefield, my former constituency. So they're a very precision piece of manufacturing and an incredibly difficult thing to engineer. And when she was bidding in for World Heritage status for the canal flight, and I'm sure it is an incredible piece of engineering, and I do hope I'll be able to come and visit one day. I was thinking about the Marsden Canal up by my old constituency in over by Huddersfield, which was the longest, deepest and highest canal tunnel in the world, and which was a real feat of sort of almost pre-Victorian engineering, starting on one side of the hill, coming on the other side, and fingers crossed everyone was going to meet in the middle, which thankfully they did. Our canals and inland waterways are a real asset to our country, important for heritage and providing many public benefits. People live on them, love being by them, use them for leisure and recreation, and as the Honourable Lady says, to get to work and to cycle to work. They're an important part of our natural environment, providing green corridors along which nature can flourish. And I know she has kingfishers on her canal as well, which is, again, something that is a rare and vanishing species in our country, as well as contributing to the growth of local economies through domestic tourism, and we've heard a great deal about that this morning. In my own constituency, I have the Oxford Canal running through Coventry North, again feeding and taking the silks away from the old Cash's factory, which then became the Courtaulds factory, which obviously invented rayon. And the rest is history, as they say, in terms of clothing. As well as being really popular for walkers, joggers and cyclists, it's a nationally important site for river voles, ratty, for those of us who loved reading Wind in the Willows to our children. So I feel quite proud that in my little bit of Coventry, we have a nationally important site for river voles, and it's very, very incongruous. If you saw the site, you would not think it was a little haven for nature. So they provide these really important biodiversity corridors. We have two navigation authorities, the Canal and River Trust and the Environment Agency. CRT reports that there were nearly 860 million visits to their canals last year, many of which were repeat visits, with around 10 million individual users each fortnight. So that gives you a real sense, Mr Dowd, of the scale of the popularity of our canals. Our navigation authorities have a really vital role to play into the future. They must help ensure that this part of our nation's key infrastructure is resilient to climate change, because they will help to meet net zero targets through sustainable transport and energy generation, and contribute to water security through flood mitigation measures and water transfers. Now, the Trust is a charity independent of government, and ministers do not have a role in its management or operational decisions. And because it's a private sector organisation, it is free to set its fees and charges accordingly. However, we do expect it to engage constructively with the boating community and take count of issues of concern raised by them, such as those mentioned here today by my honourable friend, the member for Macclesfield. So the funding of the Peak Forest and Macclesfield Canal, about which we have heard much today, it is the Canals and River Trust, as the Honourable Member has observed, which manages the canals. It was set up in 2012 as a charity independent of government to replace the publicly owned British waterways. It owns and manages a network of 2,000 miles of canals and rivers in England and Wales, including these two canals, the subject of our debate. The Trust is free of public sector financing constraints, so it can source alternative revenue streams, including charitable donations and legacies, charity tax relief, third-party project funding, and it can borrow on the financial markets. The Trust is also endowed by the government with a significant property and investment portfolio from British Waterways, now worth around £1 billion as a result of sound management by the Trust, which I do congratulate them on. To provide support and certainty for the Trust, a 15-year grant totalling around £740 million was provided when the Trust was set up. The grant was inflation adjusted in the first 10 years and then fixed in the final 5 years. It is now set at £52.6 million a year until the grant ends in 2027, representing about a quarter of the Trust's annual income. Returns from the investment portfolio provide another quarter of the annual income, which means the Trust now successfully raises half its annual income from other sources. An important part of the transfer from British Waterways was an agreed objective that the Trust would progressively move towards greater financial self-sufficiency and reduced reliance on public funding. With a reported £12 million increase in total income last year over the previous year, the Trust is already making good progress towards this objective. There has been a review of the current grant funding, and it concluded the Trust was performing well and delivering value for money, and, as confirmed by DEFRA direct to the Trust this summer, a further substantial grant funding package of £401 million will be provided by this government over 10 years from 2027. Given the tough fiscal climate in which all government spending is being closely scrutinised and the financial black hole which we were left by the previous government, as my honourable friend for Macclesfield has said, this new funding is a clear sign of the importance that this government places on our inland waterways. With all the benefits of canals that I outlined earlier, the government is supportive of canal restoration generally to bring these benefits to even more people. Bringing canals back into active use contributes to regeneration of areas that have previously been in decline. We have seen this in urban settings and also in more rural areas where we have seen growth in local economies through increased tourism. However, while we are sympathetic towards the many restoration projects currently underway around the country, there is no general government funding available for canals. Navigation authorities, local authorities and canal societies, such as the one the Honourable Lady mentioned, and I do pay tribute to those local volunteers who come out on a Sunday morning and do the litter picks and help with the restoration, because their commitment and general surveillance of the canal is an important part of making canals a safe space for everyone. Those societies, local authorities and navigation authorities can work well together to preserve the canals that they're responsible for, including fundraising and for restoration and maintenance work. Successive governments have encouraged greater local community involvement in their waterways in this way. So let me conclude, Mr Dowd, by saying I hope I've reassured the honourable members that as a government we very much value our inland waterways and the many and varied benefits that this blue and green infrastructure brings to so many people up and down the countries. We have demonstrated our commitment to ensuring this fantastic national asset is able to thrive by providing both the Trust and the Environment Agency with substantial funding over the years and into the future, with a further significant new 10-year grant funding settlement for the Trust. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The question is that this House has considered funding for Peak Forest and Macclesfield Canals. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. The sitting is suspended until 2:30 p.m. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dowd.
Thank you very much.